Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us for our third showcase. Um, Same as they were before, questions at the end, quick 5-minute presentations. Today we have Matt Nowlin from Indianapolis, and then Nicole Hall from Columbus, and then we're doing a joint Grand Rapids, Detroit presentation with Melyssa Tsai-O'Brien and Jordan Graves. So Matt, welcome up.
All right, thank you. Here we go. Integrating history and community data. So everybody here, by definition, has some sort of data tool, and we happen to have also a lot of histories, and trying to put those together is an interesting challenge that I thought might be applicable to some of you folks here. I don't need so much time on this slide. Here we go. Okay, so we, like you guys, have a community data tool, and it's, a lot of it is focused on step one, like choose a neighborhood, right? So we have these typical political boundaries or census boundaries that we, select in order to see maps and data about those places. And we are fortunate enough at the Polis Center to also have this Encyclopedia of Indianapolis. It started as a book, 1994, edited by our then executive director. And we've since turned it into an online encyclopedia. So we have, in terms of integrating history and data, we have a leg up because we have a ton of history information. This has a couple thousand entries about people, places, neighborhoods, events in Indianapolis. So that's good, but we wanted to know how can we integrate this both into our community data tool and vice versa, how can we get the data in Savvy into our encyclopedia entries. So we did this in a couple ways. First of all, there are some encyclopedia entries, specifically neighborhoods, where when you read that piece in the encyclopedia, we've integrated community data. And then going the other direction, when you select locations in our data tool, you can see neighborhood histories. But this process is geographically messy. So these are our Indianapolis neighborhoods. They're overlapping, some are huge, some are tiny. They don't make any sense. It's not, you can't have some one-to-one thing where like our data tool is about neighborhoods and our histories are about neighborhoods. It doesn't really work like that. So instead, we built custom boundaries for each neighborhood in the encyclopedia. So this kind of facilitates that overlap, right? You can have, every time you create a new boundary for a neighborhood in the encyclopedia, you can, if you need to, pick like the same census tracts or same block groups. And so at the end of the day, what this means is we used the data behind the data visualizations in our community data tool and kind of redesigned them, like used the same API and information, but redesigned them to have a different look and feel in our encyclopedia. And I think the next slide will scroll down. So this is a neighborhood entry, Irvington. This is where I live. And if you scroll down, you see a map of that neighborhood and some demographics. And I think the next slide keeps scrolling. The map is important here because this is like the exact polygon of how people consider the neighborhood, but then the data doesn't always quite match that because census geographies, right? So at the bottom, we have a link to like go view this in our Savvy tool, and you can see the exact boundaries where this data comes from. Sometimes it matches better than others, but it's kind of the best we can do. So yeah, all this data over here is like a live feed from our own community data tool. Like I said, kind of putting a different skin on the API, and we used D3JS to build those. Okay, so then flip that around. How do we get the encyclopedia content into our data tool? The first step was geolocating the entries in our region. So since there's not this one-to-one match of like data about neighborhood, history about neighborhood, instead we just have anytime we could geolocate an entry. If it's about a building or a person, maybe put it at their house. If it's about a neighborhood, draw the boundary of the neighborhood. If it's about a river, draw the boundary of the river. And then whenever you select a census tract or a block group or a township in our data tool, we just use a simple like intersect algorithm to see does anything in this, do any encyclopedia entries like show up in this polygon. And so what that looks like is you can see the entries like kind of across the top there as recommended reads. Those are just simple links over to the encyclopedia. And then you can also open up this panel on the right that shows all the entries that you see. It says we found 6 encyclopedia entries about the community you selected. So some of these are geography based, some are about people, places, or events. Last thing I'll say is we did this with histories, but you could do it with any kind of like pseudo-geographic content. If you have photos, if you have plans, if you have, I don't know, community like reports that from other nonprofits, or any document type at all. So thank you.
Big green button. Got it. Hi, everyone. My name's Nicole Hall. I'm the consulting manager / senior researcher for Cura at The Ohio State University. This is on our Pride and Joy project, the Ghost Neighborhoods. No, it's not Halloween themed, though we do have ghost in our title. Advance. Okay, in the 1960s, construction on the freeway system began dividing neighborhoods, primarily historically Black neighborhoods in Columbus. Many residents of Hanford Village and King, Lincoln, Bronzeville that grew up in these neighborhoods still live there to this day. So one of the major highways that we face is I-70. This map from the Columbus Dispatch shows the approximate locations of these neighborhoods. King, Lincoln, Bronzeville, and Hanford Village still exist today, though divided or much smaller in scale. Flytown, however, was simply erased. Many current residents of Columbus may not have heard of Flytown and the lively, vibrant culture that once resonated in the neighborhood. The current focus of our project is surrounding Hanford Village. Hanford Village is listed on the National Register of Historic Places. The top left photo depicts the homes that were constructed during the 1940s in the post-war era, and the top and bottom right photos show Hanford Village as it exists today. Flytown is one of the neighborhoods that has been displaced and destroyed by the highway construction. The photo you see here is Flytown looking southwest in March of 1957. There's a park, homes, and businesses that can be seen. However, just 2 years later, the highway construction has not only decreased the amount of park space, but has also removed some homes, several businesses, and decreased the amount of wealth generation that Flytown could have experienced in the 2-year construction span and beyond. Initially, we had 3 objectives for this project. We wanted to reconstruct lost neighborhoods in Columbus, create high-resolution digital reconstructions, and produce maps, 3D visualizations, and story maps to allow for a recreation of the neighborhoods in real time. So how did we do this? Our team gathered information from the Sanborn Fire Atlas maps from the years spanning from 1887 to 1951. These maps are readily available at the Ohio State Library and Ohio Public Libraries, but full-color high-resolution scans are available just down the street at the Library of Congress. Our brilliant graduate student UA was able to georeference the atlas sheets, segment the objects, such as building footprints and exact attributes from the map annotations. Additionally, we were able to pull address data from the index sheets of each atlas map. From there, we were able to predict building footprint pixels from the Fire Atlas maps, utilize the machine learning model to further improve our processes. This involved multiple post-processing steps, such as reclassifying layers, morphological transformations, vectorization, and regularization. We then were able to predict building footprints and polygons. The machine learning model was adapted over and over again. This is the first generation product that you can see in ArcScene Viewer. The white buildings still exist to this day. The blue area is the highway, and the red buildings are long gone from the highway construction. The first generation product led to our second generation, which is now extracting the buildings in real time, making 3D models. The homes kind of look like Mediterranean-style homes, which is not what you see in Columbus to this day. So from there, we kind of remodeled our 3D models in City Engine. We further adapted them and refined the architectural character, which matched the character of the original homes of that era. No more Mediterranean style in downtown Columbus. Ghost neighborhoods, however, didn't just stop at the Sanborn Fire Atlas maps for data. To fully capture the realness of the neighborhood, we have gathered historical parcel data, building permits from the City of Columbus, sometimes reluctantly, street imagery such as live photos in Google Street View, historical documents like National Register applications and documents from Ohio History Connection, historic GIS and Google Earth documents, and qualitative data from current and former residents. And then this is a long list of our ever-evolving team. We are currently still evolving this project and hope to advance to Flytown in the future. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. So I'm Melyssa from the Johnson Center, and this is...
I'm Jordan from Data Driven Detroit.
And we'll jump in. We'll be sharing a first look at the process and findings of the Michigan Statewide Leadership Census, a project to understand the nonprofit leadership landscape and pressing equity and justice issues faced by the communities served by those nonprofits, as well as to facilitate support, resources, and connections between organizations led by BIPOC, Indigenous, and people of color. So Black, Indigenous, and people of color, sorry, BIPOC. The project goals were to build the first detailed data set about the demographics of nonprofit leaders, board members, and staff in Michigan. And in thinking about historical underrepresentation of BIPOC leadership in the nonprofit sector due to systemic barriers based on race and ethnicity, as well as thinking about the racial funding gap, where, for example, we saw revenues and unrestricted new assets of BIPOC nonprofits as much smaller than white-led nonprofits. We also focused this on BIPOC and Indigenous and people of color in Michigan. So the project was built on more than 10 years of partnership between 3 organizations, M&A, D3, and the Johnson Center. Because of the intentional focus on race, we convened 2 oversight groups to partner with from the beginning of the project. We laid out clear expectations and timing needs of the groups. The Statewide Advisory Council would focus on the design of the survey instrument, and the Regional Task Force would focus on the messaging for data collection. For the process, we piloted the survey by nonprofits to gain input and feedback on the survey and analysis plan. Over the course of 2 months, we used a convenient sample using snowball sampling techniques to increase representation. And then we brought the findings back to the Statewide Advisory Council for input before the final reporting and release. So how did it turn out? The survey, we got 587 responses, and we had hoped for representativeness across the state, and really we got a bit lucky that when aggregated by region, we were very representative at the statewide level. In addition to being represented by region, we also were representative by annual revenue, age of the organization, and subsector the nonprofit worked within. So while we cannot know for certain whether the share of BIPOC-led nonprofits in this project were true to what the Michigan average is, we do know that this, for the first time, has proposed an answer to this question. So I'll turn it over to Jordan to discuss more findings and plans for sharing now.
So the survey respondents were divided into 2 groups, the white-led organizations and BIPOC-led, with the BIPOC-led organizations having at least 1 executive director who identified as a race other than white. But the majority of respondents were led by white executive directors, which generally reflects the composition of Michigan as well. So findings of board composition. Boards are a meaningful asset to any nonprofit and a requirement as an oversight for the organization, but some organizations didn't identify boards, which might indicate a need for support or in general when collecting the data. So BIPOC-led organizations, as you can see, had a higher likelihood of reporting an 100% BIPOC board. And similar with staff findings, when looking at the racial or ethnic identities of staff members, we only include organizations that report having at least 1 staff member. and over 58% of organizations report having a multi-race staff, which is nearly 7 times more organizations reporting an all-white team than those reporting a BIPOC team. So these were some of the key takeaways of the report. One was the power of networks, especially among nonprofits operating within the ecosystem or within the geography that we were looking at. And then the distribution of responses generally matched the overall distribution of nonprofits in Michigan. So if you want to know more, the reports are not yet released, so these are just like some of the initial findings from the survey. The full report is going to dive deeper into race and gender and ethnic identities of the executive directors, as well as their board members and staffs, and go into things like their budget, their age, and the number of executive directors. This is one component of what will be released. So there will be 6 additional story maps breaking down specific regions, but the main one focuses on the state of Michigan. So this is, it'll be in a story map format that you can scroll through and read all the findings. And also included in the story map is a network map, which shows the connection of nonprofits to funders in their specific by their region. So it uses grant data reported on Michigan for Michigan-based organizations based on their 990 forms, which are required by tax-exempt organizations. And it's only including those that filed between 2016 and 2018. And they had to opt into the survey to be included in the network map. But let us know if you're interested in being kept in the loop about convenings or knowledge sharing and network building opportunities as this work continues to grow. Thank you.
I forgot to say I was presenting, so I'm back. So today I'm sharing this year's data inventory and SNIP scores. Sorry to end with that. I'm waiting for the slide. Yeah, I might be having to press the button. I think I kind of messed up. Oh, there we go. Okay, as you all know, local data is essential to NNIP's mission, and it should be small geography, reoccurring, up to date. So that's why we ask you all every year to update your data inventory, and that includes sources, time period, and geographic levels. The last time we did this was in 2020 because of the pandemic, but it's usually updated every year, and it's been going on since 1996. So why do we do it? Both for the partners themselves and for the network as a whole. It can be a self-assessment for the partners to reflect back on the data, what can do in the future. And then for the network, it helps improve and strengthen everyone and help identify areas where there's cross-site opportunities where partners already have this data in-house. So for this past year, 25 cities updated their data inventory. Thank you all so much. We appreciate it, so we can show you. And then from the data inventory, we developed the small geography neighborhood indicator performance, known as SNIP. And this assesses how well the network is doing to assemble, transform, and maintain neighborhood level data. This can also encourage partners to expand scope. This is based on the 10 categories shown on the screen, and this was broken down from the 23 data categories that people answered on the data inventory themselves, based on kind of taking a broad approach from the data inventory itself. And then, yeah, I mistimed my slides. And these pictures are very dated, so. So this goes into the methodology in a little bit more detail. So the data that partners report have to be in-house, small geography, which can include zip codes, schools for those school level datas, different geographies, and then also reoccurring and based on recent years. And then if all of those are met, you get a point towards your SNP score. So the table on the right shows kind of the different timing elements for those different types of data. That's different based on what it is. For example, public health departments take a few years to process vital statistics, so recent data on that is a little bit older than property characteristics, for example. So how did partners do this year? This is based on the recent updates. Our highest score was 8 for 2 of the partners, and then the average was 3.56. This is pretty similar to 2020 when we last did it, which was around 3.7, and then the median is 4. This looks at the percent of partners with each of those 10 categories. So the highest being school and property characteristics data, and then the least represented is adult health and child health, which these are also pretty similar to how things usually are, especially in 2020. And then zooming into the property characteristics, which was 50% of partners reported for the specific things that the data inventory itself asks. So property characteristics being the highest, but then water usage, electricity usage at the end with just one partner, which made me think of Sarah's presentation yesterday about utility usage and that relationship with climate change and being able to map that on a neighborhood scale for mitigation resiliency. So that being an area for possible expansion for partners. And then the highest SNIP scores this year were Baltimore and Cleveland, so congrats to you all. So thank you all for doing the data inventory. We'll reach out in the next week with individual SNP scores to people and put the report on our website for everyone. Thank you all. And we'll move to questions for the speakers.
Anyone have a question? Is your survey of nonprofit leaders available, the questions that you used?
Jeff, will the survey be? Oh, yes. So Jordan and I were presenting on behalf of the teams of colleagues that worked at D3, the Johnson Center, and M&A. So I got a thumbs up from the director that the survey can be available. So connect with us.
The SEMA from Baltimore, yay us, because we've never won. And Cheryl, the good job keeping us always in the thing. Thank God Oakland's not here, because Oakland used to win like every year. We couldn't like beat them. We're here. Oh, and oh my God, you're. Oh, so good. Good thing you didn't answer it, because then we could win. This goes to show, right? So the Ghost Neighborhoods is an amazing project. I was wondering, it's a ton of work. What were the sources of funding? Because it seems like history, it seems like geography, it seems like data science and AI. Like, is it a combination of different things that you did to get that funding to do that work?
Great question. We're seeking funding right now. It's currently an in-house project. This was like I said, it's our baby project, it's our bread and butter, so we funded it in-house currently, and we're now at the process of seeking funding so that we can expand it to primarily the Columbus region, but we've also tested our model on Sanborn Fire Atlas maps from Philadelphia. So it does translate. We are also publishing a paper on our methods into a multitude of different journals, so be on the lookout for that, but currently in the process of seeking funding.
Is that me? Hello, Tommy from Atlanta. I came in, I missed this one by about a minute, which is half the presentation, but on the nonprofit census, were y'all able to get a sense of where service sites are or service areas outside of just the headquarters? And we've done some of this, and it's always tough to get a sense of the programs, who they're serving, where they're serving, and not just like the race and ethnicity of the leaders. I don't know what the limitations are.
So we weren't able to collect that, and one of the interests is comparing the leadership to like the communities and like what their services areas are. So I think, Jeff, if that is like an additional research question that was posed by the like advisory councils and groups that we had been connecting with. We did capture like what were the most pressing equity and justice issues facing the communities that were served by the nonprofits, but it wasn't captured in like the results, like by area.
And just one to the panel that was up earlier talking about the power of involving community members in the conversation. Michigan's Upper Peninsula is fairly white, let's say, really white from an ethnic perspective. And when we were very worried about fielding a survey about DEI in a very white place and kind of nonprofits looking at this saying, this is a gotcha survey, I'm not going to fill it out. But as we engaged the partners in the Upper Peninsula, they said, look, equity to us means income. That they're very concerned about inequality based on income in the Upper Peninsula, a highly rural area. So we really kind of tweaked and morphed our survey. So when we approached this from a kind of DEI BIPOC lens, we were also collecting kind of what equity means to you. So that's a really rich line of research that can come out that we weren't thinking of BIPOC leaders. But we heard from rural areas, you know, we can't really talk about BIPOC because of who already lives here, but we can talk about, if you want to engage us in a conversation about inequality or equity or access, they're completely at the table. So that was a really interesting tweak to the survey.
Yeah, I have a question about the ghost neighborhoods. Is any of that being used for reparations?
Great question. Currently, not at this time. We are looking to collaborate with the Columbus Landmarks Foundation. They're currently seeking a certified local government status for one of the neighborhoods that we want to do next. So with that, we're hoping to cross-collaborate to seek funding for Flytown, which I mentioned in our presentation. So currently not seeking reparations, though that's a good point, and we can always take that back to our team and see what they think.
And just to note, Charlotte City Council will actually approve money for reparations if you want a model of what that looks like.
Great point. Thank you.
Also, a little bit more on that too. A lot of this research was done to look at what other cities are doing about their highways. So it wasn't necessarily like that was the start of it, because we were looking at it as like a transportation access. We don't have a really good public transportation system in Columbus. And we had one when that photo was taken like originally. So kind of seeing what was torn out and looking at it through a accessibility lens, and then looking at now that there's federal funding to, take out highways or remove highways that aren't being, utilized, and how to, we wanted to show this to the people at ODOT, Ohio Department of Transportation, to say look, other communities are putting, building bridges back to communities that were torn apart. So that's kind of where the lens is at, is more of like a transportation equity kind of lens.
These were all really great presentations, and I had a question about the Encyclopedia of Indianapolis. I think that's such a cool tool, and I think being able to contextualize community profiles and history is something that's so important. I'm kind of curious how that has been used. Have you heard about use cases, people referencing it, or any kind of outreach or engagement that you've done around it?
That's a good question. Okay, so we can see from Google Analytics that the encyclopedia overall has high usage. It seems more interesting to people than our data tools. So, but how it's being used, I don't know. I don't have an answer for that. I haven't really taken the time yet to look at how many hits are actually coming from the data tools. You could at least get at some number around how much are the links being used, but we always come up against the same problem, exactly how is this information being used? What's the story behind these users? And we don't really have a good way to capture that, to be honest.
I think that's the end of our questions. Thank you, everyone. Those were fantastic presentations.
Thank you so much, everyone. Woo! So we are coming to the end of the program. But this has been my first in-person meeting. I know it was the first in-person meeting for a lot of folks. It was also an opportunity for a lot of people to return, and we're so grateful that you were able to make it out, that everyone was so engaged, and that we had so many amazing panels, speakers, conversations. So we just want to start with a note of gratitude to you, and thanks to everyone for making in-person return successful. So I wanted to start with that. So we're coming to the end of the program, like I mentioned, and we want to take this time to reflect a little bit on what your experience was, let you talk amongst yourselves, and a little bit also about what you took away from these past few days, what you'll be bringing back to your communities, and what you hope to see next year at the next meeting. So for folks in the back, if I could get the Mentimeter up, that would be super great. So it's that time again. Make sure to bring out your phones, your laptops, or your tablet. Go to www.menti.com. We have the code up here. I'll read it out as well. 3590-4185. 3590-4185. Gonna give everyone a second to get logged in. Yeah, sure. Code is 3590-4185. And don't worry, we're not leaving without you. So train's not leaving the station. It's up there too, if that's helpful. Great. Can people raise their hands if they need a second still? Hey, there we go. There's all the little emojis of people joining. Perfect. Great. All right, let's go to the next slide. That's all of you. Look at you. Sometimes you get some interesting ones. All right, let's get started. We're going to do some local trivia, and if you were paying attention to the first day, you might already know the answer to this question. What name did Frederick Douglass give the home that he lived and owned in Anacostia, D.C.? What name did Frederick Douglass, the iconic Frederick Douglass, give the home that he lived and owned in Anacostia, D.C.? It's also possible you might have heard it in one of your tours. I'm not sure. Last few seconds. Hey, some of you were listening. It accidentally slipped my slipped out of my mouth when we were having the cultural equity panel, but that's exactly right. So in 1877, Douglass bought Cedar Hill, surrounded by cedars. It's surrounded by cedars, that's why. And Douglass became one of the first Black men to break a covenant in DC by buying a home. So you should definitely come take lessons from me on how to write completely objective survey questions. But how awesome was the 2022 NNIP DC meeting, from just kind of awesome to completely awesome? Amazing. That's what I love to see. Let's see. So now we're going to pause for a second. There's some more Mentimeter questions, but I just want to give you all, like I mentioned earlier, a second to have a table discussion and a little bit of a report out too. So be ready to share out some of your thoughts. I actually might do this mostly on the Mentimeter, but if there are thoughts that people want to share out loud in person, we'd also be happy to do that. So some prompts for you. One, is there something you learned from a plenary? Is there a new lesson or best practice that you picked up that you really are excited to bring back home? Two, is there a reflection from a non-conference session or a camp session that really stuck with you? Or three, is there a takeaway from any of the showcases you've seen that has been really attractive or interesting to you? So we're going to have about 10 minutes for this discussion, so feel free to turn towards your table and start talking about what you liked the past few days. Oh, and I see some people that are not at tables, so if you want to join, feel free. If you want to talk to your buddy back there, feel free to do that too.